one very important thing is that ever since the Sexual Harassment Act has come into place, sexual harassment has now been included as a misconduct in the model standing orders. That means that, and normally what should be the case is that if there is an establishment which does not have standing orders of its own, it is presumed that they must be using the model standing orders, or they are supposed to be using the model standing orders. So this is something which we can seriously think of seeing and trying to see enforced in factories also, that since now this is a misconduct, so there should be an internal complaints committee, and therefore we should be able to raise issues of this. I already told you about the diffusing the employer-employee relationship, so I won't go into that again. Fortunately for us, the Sexual Harassment Act actually has, I think, preempted many of the problems which are going to come regarding defining an employer and employee. And as Justice Ravindra Bhatt was saying in the morning, that the definitions are very wide. They are wide. For example, when you say an employee under the Sexual Harassment Act, means a person employed at a workplace for any work on regular, temporary, ad hoc or daily wage, either directly or through an agent, including a contractor, with or without the knowledge of the principal employer. So the principal employer might say, I don't know about this person, not under my employment, whether for remuneration or not, because it could be an apprentice, it could be a trainee, it could be somebody who's just come along to help, or working on a voluntary basis or otherwise, whether the terms of employment are express or implied and includes a co-worker, a contract worker, probationer, trainee, apprentice, or called by any other such name. So I think this is the widest possible definition of an employee that you could have had in any labor legislation. Now you look at employer. Employer also, while it says that in regard to any department, organization, undertaking, establishment, enterprise, institution, office, branch of the appropriate government or local authority, there of course the head will be the appropriate government. But in any workplace not covered here, any person responsible for the management, supervision and control of the workplace. So it's simply a go down where things are being loaded and unloaded, or it is simply a place where the BD leaves are being rolled, or or maybe an illegal mine where like you have in all this Rajokari and all that, you have these Murum mines or these Gitti mines. So in any of these places, even if it is not strictly coming under any definition, it simply says in any workplace not covered under the earlier clause, any person responsible for management, supervision and control. And in relation to a dwelling place or house, that is, this is the case of the domestic workers, a person or a household who employs or benefits from the employment of domestic worker, irrespective of the number, time period or type of such worker employed, or the nature of the employment or the activities performed. So whether it is a domestic worker, whether it is an ayah, whether it's somebody who came to do a repair, whether it is a lady who came to give deliver something, whether it is a dhobi who came to give clothes, whoever it is can be covered here, because you've got a dwelling place and you're immediately saying the person in charge. So this is a very important aspect. And though the workplace of course is very wide, we've already looked into that. It includes not only the regular workplaces but even hospitals, nursing homes, but it also in dwelling houses of course, any place visited by the employee arising out of or during the course of employment, including transportation provided by the employer for undertaking such journey. So suppose there is a home-based worker. Her job is of sticking the, let us say, the sequins on a dupatta. So she gets a number of dupattas and number of sequins, she's supposed to do that. She's doing it in her own house. And the employer is this contractor who is coming to give out that work to her. even in such a situation, if there is a case of sexual harassment, your act can cover it. So this wideness of this is very, very important. And the most important thing is that where you have, for example, a house, or you have a factory where there are less than 10 people, where you don't have a official internal complaints committee, or you can't really constitute an internal complaints committee, your local complaints committee is there for you to go for redressal. Out, there is a rolling of BDs in the house, it is in small groups, and also that the immediate person who is giving out both giving the money and giving the materials is not necessarily the principal employer. So that recognition is there in the Act, in the BD Cigar Act, for example. Then you've got the Building and Other Construction Workers Act. Now that is an act which recognizes the fact that you don't have one employer, you have many employers. So how do you do that? So you need an identity card for each worker, and that identity card, as they go to different employers, it needs to be each time there needs to be an entry there saying, okay, you work with this employer for this many days, that employer for that many days. And recently, of course, the Supreme Court has been monitoring the Building and Construction Workers Act, because what was being found was that though there is a provision for all building works which happen, particularly on a very large scale, there is a certain proportion which has to be contributed to the welfare fund. There were states in which there were crores and crores of fund which had accumulated, but it was not being dispersed to anybody, because actually you have not identified who are the workers. Because once you identify who are the workers, you have to give them identity card. Then they are the beneficiaries of the fund. They can actually get things from the fund. But in practice, you find that this process has fallen far behind. And this is one case in which we can very safely say that there is no dearth of funds. There is no dearth of funds because the builders lobby, there is no choice. They have to contribute a certain percentage. That percentage is available with the government. It is a question of implementation and actually empowering those construction workers to go ahead and do that. Another category is the domestic workers category. Again, there is no national legislation. Different states have different attitudes to this. Tamil Nadu possibly has a legislation. I'm not very sure how well it is working, but it has a legislation. Kerala and Karnataka, for example, have declared minimum wages which should be applicable to a domestic worker. Many states don't have that also. So it's really up to that woman how many houses she has to work in order to really make a living or to support her family. So basically to say that through all her employment she should be able to get that much as a minimum wage. Okay. There are draft bills pending here since 2008. So everybody is in a big hurry to pass land ordinance and mines ordinance and coal ordinance, but nobody is bothered about passing the Domestic Workers Act.